But if you can say, yes, to be baptized within the religion is to show that you belong to the teachings of Christ, then that's a wonderful and amazing union, that people can carry on doing that, and that the ritual of baptism is a beautiful thing then and beneficial. But for those who are lost, for those who truly need saving, you can't douse the head of an alcoholic with water or the head of a drug addict with water and expect anything to change. But if a priest were to douse someone's head with water, then take them away and say, let me internally baptize you now. Let me raise your consciousness to the level, in Greek cosmology, that was water, the level above earth. Let me take you there. Then you could teach that person how to silence their mind, how to come into the present moment, and how to begin to have dominion over their impulses and their animal nature and their thinking mind. You can begin to teach them to beat the addictions that are holding them down by teaching them how to control their mind. And there was nothing wrong with baptizing a person with water, but there's something wrong with not baptizing them internally by helping them to raise up to the next levels of consciousness, to commune and meet God. Jesus said it himself, I will meet you in the air. None of us fly, none of us can float out into the sky to find the Christ. But what we can all do is we can internally go inside and we can raise our levels of consciousness in prayer by silencing our mind, by putting aside our material desires, by putting aside our material pleasures. And we can raise our consciousness from earth up through water. We can be baptized by the water. Then we can meet Christ in the air. When we meet Christ in the air, we can go even further and he can baptize us with fire. Hey guys, earlier today I was watching a really beautiful sunset here in Tanzania, and whilst I was watching that I was thinking about something that I was thinking about fire. I was watching the sunset, which is this magnificent ball of fire, ultimately burning gases. It's much more complex than that, I know, and it got me thinking about the way we interpret things sometimes in life, and it actually got my mind moving towards thinking about baptism and stages of consciousness. Now, I've touched on this in another video before, and before I go any further, I just want to say I'm someone in life who has been baptized, physically baptized by the church. Now, I'm not, as many of you know, I'm not religious and I won't follow a church. And at the same time, I don't condemn anything that goes on. If persons want to be baptized, I know a lot of people get a lot of comfort from being baptized. And going through the process or the ritual of baptism, where a priest comes and baptizes a person, can have a deep, profound emotional effect on some people, because they now feel like they belong to something. And I believe in it. I see it work, and for some people I have had a person here who was quite ill, and actually a lady here who came to Christianity. It was purely coincidence that this happened. She was with Islam and she was baptized, and the next day she met me and I helped her, and she's living here now in palliative care. But that baptism was so significant for her. It was like her saying, okay, I've finally I belong to where I belong to. Not that I say she belongs to anything more than what she did when she was following the Islamic faith, but to her, inside of herself, she now belonged to the teachings of Christ due to this literal baptism that she went through. And I have a lot of respect and love for that, and I'm not against it or anything like that, but for me, as a child growing up, I saw problems, and I still saw them as an older man. And I saw them much more easily when I'm in Tanzania, sadly. And one of the things I saw was that I know persons who were baptized, and supposedly being baptized is going to save you. But I know persons who were far from anything but saved, as I would see it, far from anything as a good person, but were baptized. They were still fighting with addictions. They were still fighting with the shadow within themselves, as Carl Jung would call it. And they were losing. And it didn't matter that they were baptized, they were losing. So I always had issues, even as a child, that if you were to be baptized to save you from something, what on earth does it do? Because everyone seemed pretty the same after they were baptized to me. Now here, when I came to Tanzania, I saw it very, very readily. But I also saw the beautiful side of the physical ceremony. I know of a pastor who baptized more than 100 children, some of which are disabled, and one Down syndrome boy was very honoured to be baptized, and it had a profound effect on him. So I saw that side of it here, but I also saw the other side. I saw persons performing baptisms who were not honourable and not just. I saw pastors and preachers who spoke the word of God as a job, but didn't have any sort of Christ within their heart. Just the words that they would utter were from a book, and they had little to no meaning. But they would still go around baptizing and saying it was going to save someone. So I looked at it more and I thought, does it mean that you have to have a true man of God to baptize you for it to truly help you? And I know, as I say, it emotionally can help a person to say, I now belong to this. But the truth is, and none of us can deny it, if you're a literal Christian, a Gnostic Christian, whatever you might be, no one can deny that if you take a drug addict, or a gambling addict, or you take an alcoholic, and you take them to the best priest there is, you take them to the Pope, and the Pope baptizes them, and puts the water on their head, and he walks away. The next day that person will still be a drug addict, they will still be an alcoholic, and they will still be a gambling addict, whatever it is that they are. They will still wrestle with their shadow, for the baptism did not save them from anything. The truth is that they are still lost in a battle with something they can't control. But baptism's supposed to save us. So why didn't it save them? Why doesn't it save people? So this is where I want to speak about how just perhaps the way that I have come to learn the scriptures might have some value within society. And perhaps the church should adopt this if they are going to spread the word of Christ based on the Bible. Because if you baptize persons in two ways, then you can actually save them. Instead of just wetting their head and putting them back into the world, where they are the next day still going to be, no matter how many times you baptize them, unless you heal them in some way internally and psychologically, they are still going to be an addict, or they are still going to be wrestling with their darker self, or still going to be wrestling with the demons of addiction and so on, however you want to word it. Now, before I get on to the other side of baptism, the side how I see it, there's something I want to point out. Now, I've spoke before many a time about the 5 levels of consciousness. Now what this means, in Greek times, ancient Greek times, they believed in the 5 elements was something they believed in, where they believed everything was made up of earth, air, water, fire, and then there was supposedly what's the word I'm looking for? An ether? I forget the word now. It's like the quintessence was the thing that made up the stars, because how could they possibly, the heavenly bodies possibly be made up of that which makes up our physical domain? So this was the 5 elements they had. But also within there they had the 5 stages of consciousness. And there are many really good books on interpreting myth and interpreting esoterics where you can read about this. So the stages of consciousness, the 5 stages go earth, water, air, fire, and new mind. Now this, in ancient Greek, is known, as I say, there are books you can look at to understand this. And what it means is you're changing the cycle of your brain, is how I would interpret that into modern science. Beta, alpha, theta, delta, so on. This is ultimately slowing the cycles of your mind. So the earth would be the faster cycles. And as you raise up all the way to fire, you would be running your mind at a slower cycle rate, at 4 cycles per second instead of 28, I think it is, at beta. Your mind would be running more slowly. And because your mind is running more slowly at slower cycles, you then have a peace and a silence of mind, that which many people know the Buddha sits in the lotus to try and achieve. Now, with that in mind, with those levels of consciousness that are part of Greek cosmology, ancient Greek cosmology, those are the stage of consciousness, the stages of consciousness. With those in mind, if you then bring it to a book like the Bible, which I say is esoteric, on many levels it can be deemed as a literal, a cosmological, and also an esoteric text, which is teaching you the map of the human body and how you can change the antenna of prayer within your human body to commune with God. But if you start taking those levels of consciousness and the words used to represent them in ancient Greek and putting them into the Bible, you start to see things that start to make quite a bit of sense. Now, John the Baptist said he will baptize with water. But he said, one will come after me, and he will baptize you with fire. Now he was speaking of Christ, and Christ will come to baptize you with fire. Now we all know baptism is wetting the head with water. This is how it's taken as literal. But I'm sure nobody would want someone to come and baptize their head with fire. No one would want fire putting on their head. I mean, it's just common sense that nobody would want that. So, if we look at that and what it's saying, and we use the levels of consciousness that are spoken of in ancient Greek cosmology, then you can say that John the Baptist was saying that if you come... Sorry, one of my dogs is growling. If you come to a teacher like John the Baptist, he will baptize you with water. He will raise your consciousness from earth to water. He will take it from a state of thinking into a state of thoughtlessness. And beyond there, as you raise your levels of consciousness even higher, when you meet Christ, you reach the level of consciousness which is fire. So of course the baptism of fire is reaching that brain cycle which is lower, the 4 cycles, or reaching theta. And in there you are truly in a thoughtless state where you can commune with the present moment without anything blocking you from there. You are thoughtless, you are just purely the experience of consciousness coming into you, as you were when you were a baby, before you knew what you were, what other was, before you knew what this was, what that person was, what this is. You were just a receptor of the experience of the present moment. Now, if somebody is baptized in that way, if you bring someone to a teacher, you bring a drug addict to a teacher, and they work with that person to raise themselves up out of the earth level of consciousness to the water level of consciousness, from beta to alpha. If you work with them to baptize them in that way, where you alter their brain cycles to give them dominion over the lowest level of consciousness, over their thinking mind, when that person is baptized in the waters, the next level of consciousness, they truly can be saved. They actually can be. They can say goodbye to their addiction. They can say goodbye to whatever demon is haunting them, because they have baptized themselves in another way. The way the ancient Greek cosmology works, they have lifted themselves up into the level of consciousness we call water. They have escaped the chatter of their thinking mind. And they have escaped the trap of their thinking mind telling them to indulge in that which is destroying them. And they have come into a thoughtless state. And in that thoughtless state they can gain dominion over their thoughts and their decisions. Now if you take a person to someone who teaches them meditation so as they can be baptized with the next level of consciousness water, and you take someone to a priest who is going to wet their head, I'm not saying that one is definitely going to be less effective, but the chances are that if you have a priest who can teach someone how to raise their level of consciousness, that he is going to do the person more good than putting water on their head and sending them back out into the world. Because baptism doesn't necessarily need to be a quick thing that's over. It can be a teaching, as I believe it is meant to be. I believe John the Baptist was trying to tell us how to commune with God fully and how to reach the even higher level of consciousness, which is fire. Otherwise, what on earth is to be baptized with the fire of Jesus? I mean, as I say, it's stupid, but who would want their head burning with fire? We know it can't be literal. Now, there are other parts of the scripture. In Corinthians, it speaks of a person whose possessions are burned loses everything, but they can be saved through fire. Fire that saves. We know about fire. We know that fire is corrosive and destructive. So why would it be brought into a spiritual text speaking of saving someone? And why would it be in the hands of the Prince of Peace for someone who can baptize you in a positive way with something as destructive as fire? Because to me it represents a silent state of mind. Theta. It represents the level of consciousness they called fire. And this is where you can truly sit and nestle in God without any thought or chatter, without any illusion. You can just be present and you can commune with that which I call God, that which I call Christ, in the higher levels of consciousness, the Christ consciousness, the Christ mind. So, when we get to a place within society where we can start saying, okay, we believe it this way and you believe it this way, that's fine, and I will not judge a person for seeing it one way or the other way. But for me, even as a younger man, I knew I could see it doesn't work. Now the youth, who I hope I can speak on behalf of, because I was once the living dead walking in a nightclub, and I was godless, and the place I automatically assumed to look for God growing up in the West was religion and Christianity. Now I've already stated religion to me is very difficult for me to believe literally. I love and admire persons who worship within the church and go out and do great things for the world. I have so much love and respect and admiration for you. And what I speak is not to challenge you. This is not what I'm doing. But what I'm saying is a lot of the youth of today and the younger generation, they have seen too many times, they have seen a person baptized and then fall to drugs, fall to the enemy as you would call it in Christianity, or fall to gambling, or fall to lies and deceit. Many people have seen this now. And when you bring a person to the teachings of Christ and you say you must be baptized, many persons now who have their fingertips on many different aspects of religions and spiritual information, be it Buddhism or meditation and Zen, and even the Sikh and Hindu faiths and Kriya and so on and so forth, Gnosis as something that I have a great deal of interest in, then people turn away too quickly. But if you can say, yes, to be baptized within the religion is to show that you belong to the teachings of Christ, then that's a wonderful and amazing union, that people can carry on doing that, and that the ritual of baptism is a beautiful thing then and beneficial. But for those who are lost, for those who truly need saving, you can't douse the head of an alcoholic with water or the head of a drug addict with water and expect anything to change. But if a priest were to douse someone's head with water, then take them away and say, let me internally baptize you now. Let me raise your consciousness to the level, in Greek cosmology, that was water, the level above earth. Let me take you there. Then you could teach that person how to silence their mind, how to come into the present moment, and how to begin to have dominion over their impulses and their animal nature and their thinking mind. You can begin to teach them to beat the addictions that are holding them down by teaching them how to control their mind. And there was nothing wrong with baptizing a person with water, but there's something wrong with not baptizing them internally by helping them to raise up to the next levels of consciousness to commune and meet God. Jesus said it himself, I will meet you in the air. None of us fly, none of us can float out into the sky to find the Christ. But what we can all do is we can internally go inside and we can raise our levels of consciousness in prayer by silencing our mind, by putting aside our material desires, by putting aside our material pleasures. And we can raise our consciousness from earth up through water. We can be baptized by the water. Then we can meet Christ in the air. When we meet Christ in the air, we can go even further and he can baptize us with fire. And many priests out there, they don't know this. Many Christians don't know this, and many don't need to know this. But I can tell you for a fact that many lost souls walking this planet who have no God, they do need this. I can only presume that to be so because I needed it to find God. Because I could no longer accept the literal side of things because I could see that things didn't work. So God showed me another way, through education, through knowledge. He showed me that in Greek cosmology there are stages of consciousness, and he in turn showed me what is meant to me, from my perception, what is meant by meeting Christ in the air is to go within and to raise your levels of consciousness until you indeed do meet Christ in air. When your brain cycle shifts and you're no longer thinking, and it goes silent, then you can begin to commune with the higher vibrations, with the higher energies. Then you can meet Christ in the air, then he can baptize you with fire, then you can meet John the Baptist who can baptize you with water as you become thoughtless. And it can save you. It can save a drug addict. That can save someone who is lost to addiction, someone who is lost to the darker side of life. That can save them. And that's a fact. Because in meditation, we learn to have dominion over the things that are destroying us. Now, I'm not saying, as I say, a literal baptism can't save you. Perhaps it can for some people. But for most persons, I know from experience. I was a baptized male and I was still running around and doing terrible things in the world. I was gambling and taking drugs and chasing women every weekend, nearly every day of my life. I was a very godless young man. And when I came back trying to find God in somewhere, I was met with all these things that didn't make sense. Until, whilst I was fasting, God helped me and said, follow this path. Look at the gnosis, the esoterics. And then once you get through all of these questions that you were struggling with, because these things don't make sense to you literal like they might to another, then you can look at the teachings of the man Christ, and you can say, of the man Jesus who is the Christ, and you can say, wow, this means something, this is important. But many young men and women on the planet, they won't look at it because it doesn't make any sense to them. It doesn't make any sense, but this is what I hope to show. Many people know physics, so if you tell people that Eve is not the rib from Adam, literally it's the electron from the atom that starts the multiplication of all energy, which starts the multiplication of the human species. If you say the tribe of Judah, which is a book written thousands of years ago, otherwise known as the children of light, has exactly the same number of members in the tribe as the constant speed of light in a vacuum, people can say, wow, wow, this book, what is going on? There's a mystery here. And there's science, there's facts there. And if you can say to people in ancient Greece cosmology, they had 5 stages of consciousness. In modern science, we call them brain cycles. Beta, alpha, theta, delta. Earth, water, air, fire. And if you say this is what it is to be baptized with water, you can be baptized physically, that's not a problem. You can have water put on you by a servant of God, but you can also go within and you can baptize yourself within and you can raise yourself up to the levels of consciousness that are written in Greek cosmology or in modern science, or the different brain cycles, the different frequencies of your mind. Theta being the goal, to reach fire, to be baptized by fire. And when you get there, you can hear God. For it is in getting there, using the tools I have used, that has allowed me to do all that I've done here. And I've done it for God. I did it with God. And I did it because God was there for me. While I fell, he caught me. And he said, look this way, and you will find your faith again. And now I don't really need faith, because I know. And I only hope that other people, from hearing the scriptures with the knowledge that was given to me, and the knowledge that is out there for many to find, can also begin to know God. Instead of wondering whether they believe or wondering whether they should trust, they can know. And they can know that when they say, I need this from you, please be there, that he and his angels will come. So this is my thought, this is my view, these are my thoughts on baptism. That all I've spoken should not offend you if you are a literal Christian, and I do not stand against you in any negative way. But all I say is I know myself from someone who used to take drugs, that any priest or the Pope could have wet my head and sent me out the door and I would have still been addicted. But if he taught me how to meditate as I learned, then I can raise up above my thinking mind and I can start to sever the habits, start to sever the programs that I've imprinted within my subconscious. I can reach the level of consciousness they call water. I can meditate. I can make the ripples on the top of my mind dip deeper and deeper until they go straight to the bottom of the lake of my subconscious and pull out that which is not useful for me, including the bad habits, the addictions, the negative thinking. And I hope that what I teach does not offend others, but allows persons to be brought to the beautiful side of the man, Yeshua, who tried to teach about love and sharing, can be brought to the beautiful side of the teachings of Krishna, of Buddha. It's all there for us to learn from. And we can learn from it. But unfortunately, many people now turn their back on teachings like this because they see that big word religion. And many people see religion as the boogeyman now. And it's not. It's the interpretations of men's minds around the book, which is supposed to be the teachings of a spiritual teacher. If we take religion away from the equation and we allow that generation to hear the teachings of somebody who is teaching about love and sharing and caring, we can help the planet. But if you drive them back into the nightclubs and into the godless way of life by saying if you don't believe it this way then you can't believe it, then it's failing. So I just want people to learn what I learned and benefit as I benefited, because this is how I found God again. This is how I did it, because I couldn't believe any literal things anymore because they didn't make sense to me. But now it makes sense to me so much that there's a fire in my heart, a passion in my heart to speak about it, because I hope other people get as excited about this as I do. Okay, God bless, guys.